I would like to introduce the third speaker, Ms. Cheryl Loise Leal, she is a licensed environmental planner. She took up her BS Human Ecology major in Human Settlements Planning at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. She got her master's degree in Urban and Regional Planning at the University of the Philippines School of Urban and Regional Planning in Diliman. Currently, she is taking up her master's in Crisis and Disaster Risk Management at the Philippine Public Safety College. She is now acting chief of the Disaster Risk Governance Division, Policy Development and Planning Service of the Office of the Civil Defense. I now present Ms. Leal.
Thank you, Sir Dave, for that very kind introduction, sir. Thank you po. Good morning, everyone, to our distinguished University Chancellor, Dr. Jose Camacho Jr., and to the officials of the UPLB, Museum of Natural History, and the entire UPLB community, my alma mater, and of course to our DRRM officers and partners who are present in this webinar. Good morning. So on behalf of the Office of Civil Defense, we thank you for inviting us in this webinar as we conclude the National Disaster Resilience Month. And it is my honor and pleasure to share with you the highlights of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Plan 2020 to 2030 as an enabling policy in promoting resilience of our cultural heritage. So my presentation will cover the following. I'll be presenting a brief overview, the key directions in the updating of the previous NDRRM plan, and then I'll be providing you with the updated outcomes and outputs of the updated plan, and then the implementing mechanism. Okay, next slide, please. So the NDRRM plan 2020 to 2030 was approved by the National DRRM Council last October 30, 2020 through NDRIMC Resolution number 8. And in the said resolution, the Council also recommended for the issuance of the Office of the President and issuance of a directive that will strengthen the implementation of the NDRRM plan at all levels. So basically, this version of the NDRRM framework and plan is the second version since the enactment of RA 10121 into law in 2010. Next slide, please. So section 6, okay, so just a refresher, this is the previous, this was the previous NDRRM plan on your left side. So we have 24 outcomes, 56 outputs, and 93 activities. On your right is a snapshot of our updated framework and plan. So section 6 of RA 1121 provides that the Council shall ensure that the plan is consistent with the framework. Hence, when in the process of revisiting the NDRRM plan, we also look into the NDRIM framework to ensure that the NDRIM plan will conform with the updated framework. So I'll be discussing this in detail in my succeeding slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so please refer to this illustration in clockwise direction. So based on the review conducted, we identified these key directions in the updating process, which also led to the formation of the resilience narrative and the NDRRM framework. So we have taken into account the 10 key elements of the STI framework for disaster risk reduction, as indicated in the words into action for the development of national DRR strategy. So we know that our NDRRM plan or National DRR strategy should be aligned with the Sendai framework, which is the successor policy framework for disaster risk reduction of a UN. Ito po yung indicating successor policy framework of the Hyogo framework for action na kasabay din po ng ating Millennium Development Goals. No? So with the Sendai framework and with the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, we also have to align our national DRR strategy with these updated policy frameworks for DRR and sustainable development. So this Sendai So these are the 10 key directions. So first one, the 4 thematic areas were retained as per RA 1121, but the outcomes, outputs, activities, and indicators were revised based on the learnings from the past 8 years of implementation of the NDRIM plan. And then the four thematic areas are still to be steered by the four vice chairs of the NDRRMC. We have the OSE, the ILG, the SWD, and the NEDA. And then the NDRIM plan will use a common timeline for all the activities. And then for item 4, adoption of risk reduction strategies and plans across different timescales and landscapes with targets, indicators, and timeframes aimed at preventing the creation of risk and reduction of existing risk, and the strengthening of economic, social, health, and environmental resilience. Item 5, the key activities are listed under the 4 priority areas of SENDAI. So later I'll be presenting how we align the updated outcomes with these priority areas. And then for item 6, for coherence and convergence, we look into the DRRM and CCA, or disaster reduction and management, climate change adaptation related targets under the Philippine Development Plan. Carefully took a note of these indicators or targets during the updating process. And then we also introduce vertical and horizontal interlinkages between the different outcomes and thematic areas. And lastly, the need to invest in the health of all Filipinos as demonstrated by COVID-19 pandemic. So this is done by prioritizing health and well-being in our DRRM action. Okay, next slide, please. So aside from the progress of implementation, we also look into the lessons learned or the gaps, barriers in the implementation of the previous plan, and then we identified our new directions. So among the lessons learned and new directions were identified, and these are among the lessons learned we have documented. First one is addressing the underlying causes of vulnerability. And the conduct of risk assessments at the national and subnational levels has significantly improved since RA 10121 was passed into law in 2010. This was based on our review. And while there is also an observed increase in implementing integrated risk assessment, creation of integrated risk assessment tools, LGUs or some LGUs have focused more on identifying hazards and exposure and less on analyzing the socioeconomic factors that increase vulnerability and the overall risk. Second one is linking environmental management to risk reduction and resilience building. Evidence is increasing on how extreme weather events are additionally driven by degraded environments, and the interface of natural hazards, climate change, and environmental degradation requires the assessment and analysis of shared risk across landscapes. Third is capacity building, and much work has been done. We have also noted that much work has been done in educating different sectors in disaster risk reduction, like the private sector, the civil society organizations, the academia, and other relevant stakeholders have been participating in different DRRM activities according to their areas of intervention. So while there has been a great increase or progress in this particular aspect, there's still so much to be done, starting with ensuring functionality of offices as mandated by Republic Act 10121. And our local government units representatives here would agree that we need to increase institutional capacities in disaster risk reduction, starting with our local DRRM offices, the local DRRM councils, and even the DRRM offices or units at the national level. And fourth one is financing. Another concern is that utilization of funds tends to focus on reactive what we call ex-post DRRM activities. While our framework would promote investment for prevention, mitigation, and preparedness, based on our review, we still focus on ex-post DRRM activities like for preparedness to respond, relief to rehabilitation and recovery efforts, than prevention, mitigation, and preparedness, or the ex ante DRRM. So existing guidelines in the utilization of funds, like local and national funds, need to be cascaded down. Need to be cascaded down properly to our local DRRM councils and local DRRM offices. National government agencies such as COA, DBM, DILG, and OCB in the regions across the country should have a uniform understanding of said guidelines for the local councils to be guided well in spending their financial resources on DRRM activities. Another concern is on the monitoring and evaluation side. So the NDRIM plan recognizes the importance of institutionalizing feedback and reporting mechanisms to gauge the performance, progress, and gaps vis-a-vis the targets identified in the plan. So being a long-term plan, the NDRIM plan, which outlasts political firms and administrations at the national and subnational levels, need to be regularly reviewed as regards to its relevance and impact on the changing realities both locally and globally. And one of the highlighted issues in the review is the absence of a results-based and harmonized monitoring and evaluation system. We have an initiative as regard to the development of this MNA system, and I will update later on. And so with this, we identified these new directions, and some of which are the following: risk-informed investments, advancing digital transformation, strengthening multi-sectoral approach, ensuring gender responsiveness, promoting locally led ecosystem-based DRRM and CCA, ensuring inclusion and meaningful participation, assuring public-private partnerships, establishing a functional results-based monitoring and evaluation system, and investing in public health. Ladies and gentlemen, in a nutshell, the updated NDRIM plan is divided into 5 parts. And the first part provides you with the overview of the plan. And then part 2 will give you the policy documents at the global, regional, national level, which outline why there is a need to review and update the NDRIM framework and plan. We also have in this part the guiding principles and the resilience framing. Part 3 provides you with the progress of previews and the DRRM plan, and part 4 and major considerations, which contain the challenges, lessons learned, and new directions I presented in my previous slide. Part 5 is where you can see the updated framework and then the updated outcome, outputs, and the activities and the implementing agencies. And then part 5 provides you with the detailed discussion on how to implement the NDRRM plan. So in summary, the first 4 parts provide you with the backbone of the NDRIM plan, and then the last 2 chapters will serve as our blueprint for the next 10 years. Next slide, please. So here is the updated NDRRM framework. And so when the framework was developed, it was based on a number of realities and assumptions. So these were checked to ensure that the framework remains up to date and is responsive to the needs of the time. The intent really was not to change the NDRIM vision, but to conveys the principles, conveys the reflections of the changes, priorities, and commitment of our country. So the updated framework, as seen in this slide, has 2 features. So you can see the first feature shows you the previous framework, and it shows the direction where we started, and then our direction since then. And then the second feature depicts the transformation and recalibrated framework that emphasizes a number of things. First one is the emphasis on the centrality of risk and focus on all hazards approach. So it recognizes that risk is becoming systemic and becoming dynamic in nature that changes over time with the interplay of people's level of capacity and vulnerabilities amidst the changing climate, including extreme and slow onset events and man-made activities. So the all hazards concept is referred to by Sendai framework as the concept to strengthen technical and scientific capacity to capitalize on and consolidate existing knowledge and develop and apply methodologies and models to assess disaster risk, vulnerabilities, and exposure to all hazards. Second one is coherence and mutual reinforcement of strategies among actors and across thematic pillars. So this one is emphasized to improve the system and avoid or break the silos, no? Avoid working in silos. The framework recognizes the need to establish credible linkages and enhance coherence and harmonization across goals, systems, plans, and policies to avoid duplication of efforts, overlapping of activities and initiatives, redundancy of works, and of course, wastage of resources. Thus, the thematic pillars, as you can see here, the four thematic pillars are organized and clustered or linked according to three key result areas, and that is the disaster risk reduction, KRA1, KRA2, preparedness and response, and then KRA3 is build back better. And finally, the adoption of the four priorities for action of Sendai framework as strategies towards the attainment of our goal of a safer, adaptive, and disaster resilient Filipino communities towards sustainable development. So you can see here that the four thematic pillars should be working in mutual reinforcement with each other, and they should not be working in isolation. We should not be treating them in isolation with each other. Okay. So we'll now proceed to the next slide, which shows you that the updated NDRRM has in around 200 indicators. Okay, in the full document you can see there, and this outcomes, outputs, and activities will be reviewed in three review timeline with the short term from 2020 to 2022, medium term from 2023 to 2025, and for the long term would be from 2026 to 2030. And as you can see, as mentioned in my previous slide, the review timeline are also aligned with the Philippine Development Planning Cycle, because by 2022, next year, we will be entering into a new Philippine Development Plan with the new administration. And then during the midterm review or 2025, that would be the midterm review of the new or the updated Philippine Development Plan with the new administration. And lastly, for 2030, we adjusted it to align with the end year of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Sendai framework, which is 2030. So we want to align the review timeline for us to, when we review and evaluate the NDRRM plan, this will feed into the updating process, updating of the Philippine Development Plan, since we know that the one of the bedrock strategies of our Philippine Development Plan is vulnerability reduction. Thus, we want to this updating process to fit into the PDP updating. And you can also see here that there are outcomes, or the outcomes of the thematic pillars were also clustered according to the key result areas, the three KRAs I presented in my previous slide, which correspond to the outcomes that entail greater collaboration between implementing actors. So these outcomes, the outputs, activities under this require greater collaboration between actors. Okay, so these are also opportunities for bridging programs among the thematic actors, thematic pillars. Okay, so in the interest of time, I will not take a deep dive on a specific activity and output of per outcome, but I will be presenting to you the outcomes, the updated outcomes, and the implementing or the overall lead per outcome. Plus, I will be focusing on some entry points on how we can promote or increase resilience of our cultural heritage. Okay? Next slide, please. Okay, so the first pillar is prevention and mitigation, and we have the OST as the overall lead, and we have here under this pillar is we have 8 outcomes, 13 outputs, and 70 activities, and the goal is to address current and reduce future risk of communities and government through mainstreaming integrated risk management into science, policy, and practice, and first outcome, improve access, understanding, and use of updated risk information, disaster risk reduction related statistics and research, and we have the OST as the overall lead. Second one, implemented risk-centered national and sub-national and sectoral policies, plan and budgets, and we have the ILG as the overall lead. For outcome 3, we have increased structural integrity of housing, building, and critical infrastructures. And we have DPWH as the overall lead. For outcome 4, we have institutionalized, timely, responsive, context and culture specific early warning systems reaching the last mile, and we have the OST as the lead agency. We also have outcome 5, communities have access to effective, responsive, and inclusive social protection, risk financing, and insurance mechanisms led by the UF of our Department of Finance. For outcome 6, natural resources and ecosystem integrity are improved and sustained to be led by the ENR. And outcome 7, disaster resilient livelihoods and businesses to be led by Department of Trade and Industry. And we have finally outcome 8 under this pillar is disaster resilient human settlements to be led by Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. Next slide, please. As mentioned, I highlighted several entry points of how we can improve or promote resilience of our cultural heritage, or how we can scale up our efforts on this particular agenda. And for outcome 1, we have highlighted this one. And we would like to share with you that we have here several implementing agencies, and we also have here other agencies as well. And we also have 3 outputs under this on disaster and climate hazard and risk information, information management systems, and standards of DRR related statistics. So I want to highlight here why this is an important or an entry point of how we can promote resilience of our cultural heritage, because accounting of cultural heritage is very important. Building up exposure database is very important, and in the standardizing of DRR related statistics, it is one of the priorities. Cultural heritage or accounting of cultural heritage is one of the priorities, because in Sendai Target C, reduction of economic loss due to disasters, one of the indicators there is the loss and damage of our cultural heritage. And so the challenge there is accounting the loss and damage in our cultural heritage, and how we can account them. It's important that we know, or we know where this cultural heritage are. Okay, so we need to account them, make an inventory of our cultural heritage, and build up exposure database, risk information as regard to our cultural heritage. And this is one of the priorities of this framework. Also, currently we have the Sendai Framework Monitoring Technical Working Group under the DRRM Council, and we have the OT as one of our members, and also the NCCA as one of our members to finally make and to discuss how we can promote the accounting, or how we can establish a mechanism on how we do accounting of our cultural heritage. Next one would be, next slide please. Okay, for outcome 3, we have increased structural integrity of housing, building, and critical infrastructures. And we have here implementing agencies and other agencies involved. And we have here a very one output, and it's very broad. And I just would like to highlight that we have activity 3.1.1, repair, reinforce, retrofit critical heritage infrastructures, such as but not limited to energy, communications, transportation, water, health, education, agricultural, solid waste, and cultural heritage. One of the indicators under this outcome, annual direct economic loss to cultural heritage damage or destroyed attributed to disaster. And this is aligned with C6 or Sendai Framework Indicator C6 or under Target C of the same Sendai Framework for disaster risk reduction. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have thematic area on disaster preparedness, and the goal is, and the overall need is DILG. We have here 4 outcomes, 11 outputs, and 51 activities. The goal is to establish and strengthen capacities of governments, communities, CSOs, and private sector to anticipate, cope, and recover from the adverse impacts of hazards, potential cascading disasters, and minimize losses and disruption of daily life. And we have here 4 outcomes, all being led by PILG. And we have outcome 9, enhanced risk awareness and risk-informed decisions and actions of governments and communities. We also have outcome 10, increase institutional capacities of national and local disaster risk reduction and management councils and offices. Outcome 11, strengthened partnership and coordination among all key actors and stakeholders. And for outcome 12, implemented comprehensive and mutually reinforcing national and local preparedness and response policies, plans, and systems. And as you can remember, this outcome 12 overlaps with the next pillar, which is the disaster response and early recovery. Next slide, please. So for disaster response and early recovery, we have DSWD as the lead. And the goal is to provide risk-based, timely, and anticipatory response actions to address basic life preservation and immediate needs of communities and government. Also, affected communities, population are able to continue life with dignity and prevent or minimize exacerbation of emergency situation. And our first outcome under this, well-established disaster response operations with well-equipped and protected workforce and volunteers to be led by DSWD. For outcome 14, appropriate early actions are provided to communities with DILG as the overall lead. We have outcome 15, accurate, reliable, and timely information management to be led by DSWD. And for outcome 16, affected communities are provided with gender-responsive and conflict-sensitive basic necessities and services. And lastly, for outcome 17, implemented an integrated system for early recovery. And outcome 17 also overlaps with the next pillar, which is rehabilitation and recovery pillar. And we have NEDA here as the overall lead, and we have 6 outcomes, 10 outputs, and 32 activities. The goal is to speed up recovery from disaster losses through rehabilitation and recovery programs that are aligned to sustainable development and build back better principles. For outcome 18, clear policy directions for rehabilitation and recovery to be led by NEDA. And we have for outcome, and you can see here that most of the, for outcome 18 and outcome 23, cultural heritage these outcomes are also entry points on how we can recover or rehabilitate affected cultural heritage of the country due to disaster. And for outcome 19, we have sustainable and socially inclusive income sources for households are made available and stability of economic activities restored to be led by DTI. We have for outcome 20, agricultural production is restored or increase, and support services for farmers, fisher folks, laborers made accessible. And for outcome 21, it's about housing and affected families and individuals have access to affordable disaster resilient housing that are located in safe zones where social services and public facilities are available, and financial assistance to rebuild houses in areas that are declared as safe zones. And this will be led by this would. For outcome 22, affected individuals, families, and communities have access to responsive, appropriate, and adequate education, health, and social protection services. And last item, also about resilient infrastructure system, we have disaster resilience standards in infrastructure are observed during rehabilitation and recovery to be led by DPWH. Next slide, please. So this is the final part of my presentation, and I'll be providing you a brief overview on how we implement the plan. As you can see in my previous slides, we have there several stakeholder groups, and we have different roles and responsibilities for each stakeholder group. And for the overall steering and leadership, those are the overall lead per thematic pillar. And we have the NDRRMC chair, the SND. We also have the 4 vice chairs of the NDRMC as the overall lead, including the OCD as the executive arm or the secretariat of the National DRRM Council. And then we also have, as the overall lead, they are expected to provide overall steering and leadership to ensure that outcomes, outputs, and activities under the plan are achieved in collaboration with the lead implementing and other relevant agencies. For the other stakeholder group, we also have the lead agency, and they are actually the outcome leads I was also able to present it in my previous slides, that per outcome, we have the lead, and they are the lead agency, the overall lead. They play a key role in providing oversight in ensuring that specific outcomes, outputs, and activities are achieved by facilitating synergy of activities. It's very important. This word is very important, the synergy of activities, because we have a lot of implementing agencies, as you can see in the outcome that I presented related to infrastructure or resilient infrastructure systems. We have a lot of implementing agencies. So the lead agency plays a crucial role in facilitating synergy among implementing actors and among their activities. And so they will work closely with the OCD as the secretariat and the implementing agencies as well. And next would be the implementing agencies. There are the agencies that identified per outcome na medyo marami po sila. And they are expected to cooperate and complement each other by supporting and engaging in activities and producing outputs that are relevant to the achievement of the outcomes. They are basically NDRRMC member agencies as identified in RA 1121. And they implement activities related to the outputs or activities under the plan. And lastly would be the other agencies. So as key stakeholders, actually the other agencies are the non-NDRIMC member agencies, but we identified them as key stakeholders in the pillar. And as key stakeholders, they are encouraged to initiate actions that will contribute to the achievement of the outcomes, like what our the National Museum of UPLB MNH is doing right now. They are actually classified as other agencies, other relevant agencies that could have relevant initiatives that will contribute to the achievement of our expected outcomes. And as key stakeholders, they are encouraged to initiate actions, and their actions should be done in collaboration with the implementing agencies as well, in consideration of their respective mandates. And of course, our commitment also is to engage and involve this implement other agencies in our planning and in our implementation, and to strengthen partnership among or with these partners identified in the plan. And for section, would like to highlight section 5.2 of the IRR, duties and responsibilities of the National Council. Every member agency shall be assigned functions relevant to their mandates, programs, and geographic jurisdiction, and special constituencies to be indicated in the plan. Well, I was not able to present all the outcomes, all the outputs and activities, but you can see in the full document that the implementing agencies, the local government units, the DRRM councils, meaning all councils at all levels, and even the leagues of local governments, the private sector, the civil society organizations, the academy, of course, are also identified as implementing agencies, or if not implementing agencies, other agencies, because we deem them very important in the implementation, in the planning and implementation, compared to the previous NDRRM plan that local government units, local DRRM councils have very limited uh, participation in terms of as identified as implementing agency, they are very limited in terms of the outcomes presented in the plan. But for now, I think all outcomes we have indicated the local government units as one of the implementing agencies. Okay, next slide, please. And right. So given that the interim plan is strategic plan, and so we need to operationalize the plan. We have identified these DRRM action plans to operationalize the plan. And for item 1, we have agency DRRM action plan, or the DRRM implementing plan of the agencies. And this will be prepared by the implementing agencies identified in the plan to translate the plan into actionable strategies. And Section 5.2 of IRR indicates that each agency of the National Council shall formulate its own DRRM implementing plan and their manual of operations. And our respective action plans should have proposed timeline, of course, and budget to operationalize the entry plan to be submitted to CD. And then for right now, we are currently developing the thematic pillar plans, and we are expecting 4 thematic plans to be submitted. And this must be developed within 1 year upon the approval of the plan. And this plan will ensure coherence and complementation are happening among implementing agencies within each pillar. This is an opportunity for each thematic pillar to identify priority actions and, of course, identify bridging programs that can be implemented with other thematic pillars. And the vice chair of each pillar shall take the lead in formulating the plan. And then last would be the regional dream plans. Our regional DRRM councils headed by the OCD regional offices, of course, except for BARM and NCR, they will be formulating the respective regional DRRM plans to put the NDRIM plan into actionable strategies to be implemented at the regional level. So in the case of BARMPO and NCR, OCD is just providing technical assistance for the development of the regional DRRM plan. Okay. So next slide, please. So in terms of monitoring and evaluation, currently we are happy to inform you that we have a project with UNDRR and UNDP, and this covers the development of the M&E framework and plan, the web-based system, and the M&E training. And to inform or to guide this initiative, we have created a technical working group under the NDRIMC to provide technical guidance to the team of consultants. So we're done with the situational analysis and gaps assessment for the development of M&E framework and plan. And we hope that this project or the web-based system will be made available by the end of this year to facilitate the monitoring and evaluation of our NDRRM plan. And this will feed into our reporting to the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. Okay. All right, so given that the NDRIM plan is a strategic plan, we have identified the importance of, next slide please, we have identified the importance of localizing the plan. So recognizing that disaster risk is context specific, risk profiles may change over time, and that local scale is where these changes are more directly perceived, and action must be taken as well. So thus, it is centrally important that local actors should be taking part in the RR process and consolidate development pathways that include disaster risk reduction. Why it's important to localize our DRR efforts, because we have a series of factors. First one, impact of disaster disasters are most immediately and intensely felt at the local level. Second, hazards usually occur locally, and many of these most effective tools to reduce exposure to hazards, katulad po ng land use regulations, enforcement of building codes, our zoning ordinances are at the local level. Third one, it is at the local level where governments and local actors are the first are or can best engage with each other and work together. And lastly, local actors are actually our first responders when it comes to disasters. So hence, feedback and adjustments can be adapted and implemented more quickly and according to the specific context. So as such, target E of the SETE framework promotes the alignment of local DRR strategy, the national DRR strategies. Hence, we have adopted the words into action developed by UNDRR, and then we added the Public Health System Resilience Scorecard developed by World Health Organization, and to integrate health-related aspects or health-related preparedness measures for our local government units, and we modified it according to our context. And so we look into the thematic pillars and the outcomes, corresponding outcomes per is essential. And we noted there, what does it mean at the local level? What does this essentials mean at the local level? So yun po yung makikita dyan. Please note that this is not a step-by-step guide on how to develop the local DRRM plans of the local government units, but it is a blueprint or to just see or assess our readiness of the local government units' readiness in terms of disaster risk reduction and management initiatives. Okay. All right, I think yes, so this is my final slide, and the National DRM Plan is already available online, and you can access the full document at this link, and you may, if you need further clarifications, inquiries, you can contact the NDRRM Secretariat. So with that, maraming pong salamat for your attention, and thank you again for inviting OCD in this very important event. Thank you po.